Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Zenith, that podcast where we shot a god, because this week we watched Dawn of the Gods.
By James Follet,
Directed by Desmond McCarthy.
And aired on January 28th, 1980. It's the first writing credit from James Follet.
One of only two.
What else did he do?
Something in the future that I didn't see.
All right.
I just saw that this was his first story, and I just saw that it was one of two. So that's cool. Kind of fun.
It was good. He did a great job on it.
He did. I agree. In relation to Doctor Who, where are we airing this week? Once again, I think we're right after when Shada would have finished, so...
Right.
We're for sure in the inter-series era now.
I think either last week or 2 weeks ago, I was like, man, since Doctor Who's not airing at this time, we should look up some other shows that were airing out at the time. And like I do every single week, I forgot that we talk about this. So I didn't look anything up.
That's okay. But like I said last week,
we can start next week.
I still have an impossible time remembering the name of Bounty every week. Though I've pretty much got it down now, I think. In other news... I actually went back and rewatched Volcano because I'm a good podcast host who actually rewatches things when I said I would rewatch it.
I didn't. Well,
I noticed a lot more in this
watching of Volcano.
I only made 2 notes about just a couple things that I wanted to mention. Number one, we forgot to mention that they last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember the exact time scale on this, we talked about an email we received from RG about how Gisette Simon didn't like Dana because she was the character was sexist or racist. And I actually,
or both.
Watching Volcano, I actually did pick up on something that we forgot to mention last week, which is that Avon and Callie both make fun of Villa for, quote, not noticing Dana literally all the time. Basically, apparently Villa is... leering at Dana is the implication there.
Really? Huh. Yeah, I don't think we picked up on that at all.
Because Callie says something like, oh, Dana's very pretty, and Villa's like, oh, I hadn't noticed. And then as he's walking away, Avon goes, yes, Callie and I have noticed you not noticing all the time. And Villa kind of just looks at them and shrugs, which is something I just wanted to mention because it plays into that whole thing, the racist, sexist thing that is probably something we should have actually picked up on last week because I think it's actually kind of an important character moment. Yeah,
I actually, now that you bring that up, I actually do remember that sequence. I think that totally went over our heads last week.
It did. Yeah, my other note is Avon is cold, so I don't know what that refers to exactly, right?
Yeah, so I think in this episode, Tarrant, I can really see what people mean when they say that Tarrant sort of fills this role that Blake used to fill. Avon, and I think Paul Darrow is a big part of this because I know he didn't want Avon to fill in he didn't want to step into the sort of hero side of Blake's character.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting because on my rewatch of Volcano, there was a moment where it was an exchange between Avon and Tarrant. It was right near the end of the episode. And all I could think was Avon is Blake and Tarrant is Avon, because what Tarrant said to respond to Avon was exactly what Avon would say if Avon was Blake in that situation.
Was it when he says, I don't trust anyone? Or
it was the I don't trust anyone line, and I was like, that's exactly what Avon would say.
Right. It's not a one-to-one sort of thing. There's this weird dynamic, right? Because there's sort of bits of, this is really weird phrasing, but there's like bits of Blake and Avon, and there's also bits of Avon and Blake and Tarrant.
Well, how I would describe it is you have like these 2 decks of cards, and one deck is Avon and one deck is Blake, and so Blake left, and so now you took these 2 decks and you shuffled them, and then you distributed the cards again randomly to Avon and Tarrant. So Avon ended up with some of Avon's cards, but also some of Blake's cards, and Tarrant ended up with some of Blake's cards, but also a couple of Avon's cards. And I guess just kind of to put a capstone on Volcano, I still don't think it's great, even after rewatching it. I still kind of have a problem with them pairing Tarrant and Dana together, but I do see, I guess, kind of, last week we got an email from RG talking about how she really liked the dynamic between them, and I can see flashes and moments of it that are really fun, but
moments
I still
of
think...
brilliance through the volcanic ash.
Yeah. I definitely enjoyed it more on a rewatch. I still don't think it's great, though. And I guess that leads us right into Dawn of the Gods now.
Which was great.
Thankfully. I was getting really discouraged there after Volcano.
Yeah, no, this is right up there with Aftermath, really strong episode.
Right. The season kind of finding its footing again. This is the first episode that doesn't mention Blake at all, fun fact.
Right, which is interesting, but I want to say this before we really get into it. Strong episode. I don't think it was Dana really who even contributed to that at all, which is, again, continues this trend of like being disappointed in where they're going with Dana.
Right, but before we even get into that, we should do our little quiz questions.
Right.
Because this is an opportune time, so, since I always go first, why don't you take the first crack at this week?
So mine is, Callie compares Thawne to two mythological creatures from Earth. What were they? A, unicorns and leprechauns. B, unicorns and dragons. C, elves and dragons. Or D, elves and unicorns.
Okay.
Place your bets. Make your choices now.
My question is a little more silly. I went for a little more lighthearted one this week. At the start of the episode, they're playing what appears to be a space version of Monopoly.
Monopoly by Terry Nation
is having a bit of a hard time, and Dana offers him to stay in Space City, which we've seen before, fun fact. What is the rent that she tells Villa she'll charge? Is it A, $2,500 a night? Is it B, $4,000 a night? Is it C, $5,000 a night? Or is it D, $7,000 a night? So place your bets now.
Oh, I don't even know the answer to this one.
So
that's where the episode starts, actually. They're playing
with the
this
space Monopoly.
Villa,
Aurak is playing too.
Yeah, Aurak is... This is actually my what would Blake do for this episode, because I don't think Blake would sit down and play Monopoly with these guys.
I mean, I agree with that. I think that's kind of a silly one, but yeah, Blake wouldn't have time for these childish games.
Oh, I think he'd have time for it. I just think he would think himself better than sitting down and playing Monopoly.
He would be doing what
Avon was doing. Or
Tarrant was doing.
Was Avon playing with them?
Avon was playing with them.
Yeah, Tarrant was the one who was...
Basically, Tarrant is doing what Blake would do in this situation.
Yeah, this is where things become weird.
Because Avon is playing with him because he's talking about how he's going to win. But then Aurak is like, I'm going to win.
Right. Aurak is vehement that he is going to win. Villa's like, oh man, why do I always lose? And Avon says maybe being born a loser would have something to do with that. And this is weird because this isn't even like a clever Avon line. This isn't even like a snappy Chris Boucher Avon line. This is like just a stupid insult. I didn't think it was a good line from Avon.
Well, you have to remember that Villa is a Delta-grade imbecile.
Is that what it was? So he said and then revealed that he wasn't. We don't know what's true or not.
I should have written down what he said in Volcano, what his rank was, but I didn't.
He was a Delta-grade. I remember that from Shadow.
He said Delta-grade, something with an I. But
something technician, right? Or
in Volcano, he calls himself like a Delta-grade imbecile or a Delta-grade idiot or something like that. He says like, I'm a Delta-grade imbecile, but I'm not stupid or something like that.
Yeah. Which, speaking of Shadow, this episode has some big similarities to Shadow.
Yeah, one of my notes is explicitly, is this Shadow? ? Because it comes even like right at approximately the same time in the season as Shadow did in Series B.
No, Shadow was a second. I wouldn't call that, because of the series are only 13 episodes each, I wouldn't call that the same position, second to fourth. But
I call that roughly the same position.
I call it roughly the same early season, but...
Was Shadow really the second? I thought it was the third.
Yeah, it was probably the third. Because we had
it was the second.
We had Redemption and then Shadow.
And then Weapon.
Right, it was actually the guy it was actually Kozer who called himself the whatever grade weapons technician.
Yeah.
That was the phrase I was talking about.
Yeah, but there's a lot of parallels between this and Shadow in the beginning, because Aurak kind of goes on a power trip here and takes over the Liberator. Because the Liberator keeps getting these course deflections, and Tarrant's like, what the hell, guys? We're getting these course deflections. And Zen runs this diagnostic all the way down to the peace level. Avon's like, it's taking a long time. And then Zen's like, well, everything's working well.
Well, Zen is reporting, their flight deviance or whatever.
Right.
And Aurak is the one who's saying, like, everything's going... Aurak is, like, loopholing his explanation of what's going on, which actually Avon and Tarrant leverage later when they're held up with those, like, truth guns or whatever. But Aurak is the one here who is like, everything's going according to plan, guys.
Yeah, he's like, everything's acting normally.
And then like 5 minutes later, he's like, by the way, I took control of the ship.
Yeah, but later on, like Zen doesn't respond when Avon asks him to put like auxiliary thrusters on. And he's like, Zen, respond. And then Oryx's like, all of Zen's commands have to go through me now. And Avon's like, what the hell, Orak?
Yeah, this brings up like the threat of Orak. Like Orak can hold them under his non-existent thumbs if he wants, really. And he doesn't and hasn't really so far.
Because he sees this black hole that apparently isn't emitting any X-ray radiation, which is like fascinating to him. I'm going to go into the physics of this for a brief moment here because I think it's actually interesting. We don't actually know exactly why there's X-ray emission from suspected black holes because you can't see a black hole. In most ways that you see a black hole is from the hole it leaves in the sky because no light comes from where the black hole is. But what you can see is X-ray emission from most black holes, and typically the X-ray emission comes from interstellar gas that basically orbits around the black hole at high velocities. And the exact mechanism that causes the X-ray emission from this is speculative at best right now. But basically this orbiting gas causes these X-rays to be emitted. And that's how you can actually have X-ray emission from a black hole, because they bring this up in the episode and it's like everybody knows it's about a black hole. Black hole gravity is so big that light cannot escape a black hole. Like even light cannot escape. And basically the reason why you can have this X-ray emission from a black hole is because it's not actually coming from inside the black hole itself. It's coming from this gas that orbits around the black hole and basically spirals inward into the black hole as it's falling. So,
okay, cool. That's interesting. There's actually, I listened to this interview with this, I guess, theoretical physicist, Chanda Prescott Weinstein. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know her.
I recognize the name.
Recently. And I was... The reason why I got this on the radio, actually, the reason why this caught my ear as I was flipping through radio channels is that she was talking about the definition of science. So there's stuff from that interview that I want to pull later in this episode when we inevitably get to our emails and talk about the, science fiction and definitions and what we think about that.
I don't think Sergeant Joanna talked about it in the email this week.
Okay, well, I'm still going to bring up stuff from this interview because she touches on that, but she also, in that interview, talked about stuff. She talked about black holes. She talked about stuff like dark matter and dark energy, and she was like, I'm going to try to explain this in as layman's terms as possible. And she did a good job of it. I didn't understand like half of it even still, but hey, it was interesting.
Black holes are weird. So yeah.
She also talks about and this is something that we have actually briefly touched on, but she talks about I think the term, she used the term colored physics. She talks about the race aspect of science. And that's something I'm going to touch on later when we get to the emails probably. Because we usually have that science fictional segment at the end.
Oh boy. But basically Orak wants to examine this black hole because there's no X-ray emission coming from this black hole.
Right. And then there's this really dramatic line from Villa where the camera zooms in on his face and he's like, we're falling into a black hole.
So they're falling into the black hole.
There's a really cool shot of them. It almost looks like a film negative where the Liberator is falling into the hole. Looks awesome.
Yeah. It was okay. The cooler shot was the next shot when everyone's on the floor getting compressed.
Oh, that actually reminded me of
the Stella?
No, Duel.
I guess.
The scene in Duel where they're being controlled by
the gods on the planet.
Yeah. But they're falling on the floor, they're getting compressed, they're getting screwed over by the black hole.
And they survive, and Avon's like, wow, well, survive. Well, actually, during the compression.
Yeah, during the compression, Avon tries to slip into a spacesuit.
Not that that's going to do anything for him.
You get the impression that somehow it's going to offer him more protection. That's why he's doing it, especially because during this, Tarrant tries to crawl over to him. He's like, oh, no, you don't.
We're all going down together.
We're all going down together, basically.
But once again, not that suit would do anything. What would it do?
Yeah, but
they're getting compressed. Being in the suit's not going to make him get compressed any less. It's not like he can go out of the Liberator because he's still in the black hole.
Yeah, but at the same time, what this is doing in the story, you get the impression that he's separating himself from them by trying to do something different. He's trying to get out of this boat. Whether what he's actually doing is going to achieve that or not is questionable.
It won't. There's another moment in this where it's Tarrant does the Avon thing and the Avon does the Blake thing, where Avon is basically being a leader and then Tarrant is like, I may have to kill you.
Oh yeah, that's.
And then Avon's like,
if you know how the show ends, that's interesting. That's an interesting line.
I mean, whether or not you know that, that's just
an interesting
Avon
line anyway.
always used to talk about how he might kill Blake and he might take the Liberator from him. So to see Tarrant now be like, I'm going to kill you, Avon, is like, that's Tarrant doing the Avon thing to Avon's Blake.
Right.
Like I said, Tarrant got some of Avon's cards and Avon got some of Blake's cards.
I wonder if there are any Blake 7 collectible card decks.
Oh, no.
It would be easier to import than a freaking Blu-ray set. Still mad. They should release this Monopoly game as well.
God, no.
Why not?
Blake 7 Monopoly?
Why not?
Monopoly sucks. That's why not. Monopoly is scum class board game.
Oh, just because it takes too long.
Oh, there's a lot more problems than that in Monopoly. No. Monopoly is how you destroy relationships.
Yeah, well,
the whole point of Monopoly is to show you that monopolies are bad, but no one seems to get that from Monopoly.
Well, no, that's the predecessor to Monopoly, and like, look, the rhetoric of the game actually, the intentionality actually of the game doesn't have anything to do with the game itself. But we're gonna have to like set that aside for now because there's so much we could even talk about that in terms of like one literary theory, game theory, and stuff like that. But I'm not gonna get into it.
Look, my point is Monopoly sucks. Okay, it just sucks. Once you've played like other more well-developed board games, you can never go back to Monopoly.
Well, all right. I don't play board games anyway, so they're called board games for a reason. Haha. Anyway, they make it through. They eventually just wake up and they're like, "Guess we made it through, guys."
Yeah, Avon's like, "Guess we survived," and then Orak's like, "We're in negative space where space-time is folded in on itself." I'm not going to go into the physical problems with this statement.
This
just
was actually,
accept it as science fiction.
This was cool. I didn't have any physical problems with this because I didn't like pick up on anything because I don't know any of the like physics behind this or anything. But this was cool. They just try and find out where they are. They fire the laser and it like comes back at them for whatever reason. I don't think they actually put a solid reason on why this happens. But someone's like, "Oh, maybe the space here is folded and it shot right back at us." And then Villa's like, "What if it just deflected off the walls or something like that?"
In reality, Villa's probably the one who's correct here, but
as usual, Villa is usually correct.
But basically, I'm not going to go into it too much, but basically they're talking about how space is negatively curved in this area. Our universe is, based on experimental data, probably positively curved. Whatever that means to you, you can take it. It's probably right, but because I'm not going to try and explain it in layman's terms right now. But basically, they're talking about how space is negatively curved, so they believe that because of that, the Liberator is shooting at itself because space is curved in on itself, which is very tricky to wrap your head around, really.
It's a cool... I don't know like anything behind this, but it's a cool concept to me.
It's pretty nifty. Negatively curved space generally implies that for example, if our universe was negatively curved, it tends to, when you work out the math, and the math is very complicated and confusing, tends to imply that the universe is going to collapse in on itself at some point.
Yeah, that's another cool concept. This is something we've been touching on for a couple weeks and probably will touch on later in this episode, but that's a cool thing. It's science fiction stories, and I'm still hesitant to use that term for reasons I've gone into in detail, but I'll just use it anyway. Science fiction stories are like, they're able to do that. They're able to take these things from the sciences, whether that's physics or something else, and like do something really cool with it. You know, a writer might say like, "Oh, what if like this happened? What if you take this and like put it in the story like this and thematize it like this and did something cool like this?" And I know those are vague terms, but there's so much you can do with these ideas.
Right.
But anyway, they don't actually ever put like a solid cap or tell you why this happens, but maybe it's just that thing firing back at them. Maybe it's not the Liberator.
Yeah, that's the other thing. But it fired back at the exact same energy, which is why they suspect it might be the Liberator. Anyway, they decide to basically draw straws to decide who's going to go outside and find out what's out there.
They don't draw straws. They just
and by draw straws, they all go, "Okay, Villa, it's going to be you." And he's like, "What?"
Like, it would have to be someone with impeccable lock-picking skills. Villa's like, "Oh, no, not me. I'm not stepping 1 foot outside there." And there's this funny, like, sort of fade-out transition to him wearing the spacesuit. He's like, depressurizing now, opening the hatch now. The spacesuit is really well designed.
Yeah, it looks kind of steampunky in my opinion.
Yeah, it does. And steampunk is not a thing that like really existed in any sort of tangible form in 1980, but it does look kind of steampunk. And I was listening to Blake 7 in Character recently. One of their recent episodes, I'm not sure, it might be their most recent one. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, depending on when this...
Well, it may longer be...
Yeah, it might no longer
most
be.
Recent.
Yeah.
By the time this comes out.
It was about Federation troopers, And they mostly go into detail about the costumes because they're cosplayers, I think, or they make props from the show and costumes from the show, at least the two hosts of that show. So they definitely go into a lot of detail about how the Federation troopers' outfits were made for the different series, because they actually do look different between the different series, which isn't something that I really picked up on too much. I mean, I think I knew in the back of my mind that the costumes were different, but they like pick apart the different details and stuff. And because, they were saying like, back in the late 70s, early 80s, if you wanted to, this word wasn't around back then, but cosplays, these characters, what you had was like the few press release photos that they had, and you had to sort of make out like, what are these people wearing, and how once I figure out what they're wearing, can I make that myself?
Well, I mean, the great thing about Blake 7 is that the budget is so low, the answer is probably yes, you could make this yourself at home.
But they were also talking about, and this is sort of getting away from what I wanted to bring up in this, but I'll mention it anyway because it's interesting, but what they were talking about is that a lot of this stuff, because a lot of this stuff was just made from them going to like stores and picking out like a literal just belt from a clothes store or something, is that you can't make a lot of these costumes in the exact same way anymore. You can't just go to a store, because the example they mentioned was a reversible colored belt for men, like a black that's belt on the
I have one of
man's
those.
belt. Well, I have one too, but apparently they can't find one. But men's reversible belt is black on one side and brown on the other. And they were like, man, you don't really find those anymore. So that's like something that really dates the ability to make these costumes on like the same kind of budget.
Just come to America, honestly. You can find those everywhere.
But anyway, why I wanted to bring that up is they were like going into detail about what, the different pieces of the costume and stuff, and really made me appreciate the costuming on Blake 7 more than I ever have. Because it isn't, there's a lot of like janky stuff on the show, and I'm not going to beat around the bush in terms of that. But like a lot of it, it's like, it's really intricately made, whether budget aside, it's like, it's cool how they achieved a lot of this stuff.
No, I agree.
And this spacesuit is a great example of it. So, Villa,
this is my what would Blake moment do before we continue with that. I was trying to remember what I was going to say about this. Basically, in my opinion, I think Blake, being the natural born and charismatic and rather bossy leader he is, would have gone out of the airlock himself. He would have been like, "No, y'all stay here. This is my space to explore."
I think in this case, Blake would have taken someone with him. He would have gone himself, but not alone.
Probably. Blake always seemed to drag Jenna into his rather foolhardy adventures, and then let's not beat around the bush here either. This is a very foolhardy venture, sending someone out into negatively curved space that they have no idea what's going on. Orak is basically being a little POS over there in the corner, basically being like, gotta do all this studying.
Orak is also still mad that they cut off the Monopoly game short.
Because he thought he was going to win.
But
anyway.
They tell Villa to use his delicate, skillful touch to open the hatch because he has a little trouble. And he's like, he just kicks it open. And he's like, I used my delicate, skillful foot. Liked that line.
Is this the same hatch that we saw in The Way Back? The Spacefall, sorry? Because that was the airlock in Spacefall.
I don't think so, because when you get maybe I'm misremembering, but if I remember correctly, in Spacefall, you get the impression that when they go through that airlock, they're either in the bridge, which probably isn't true, or they're very near the bridge, which
I thought they were very near the bridge.
Yeah. It looked like, and I think this is a behind-the-scenes thing, because they hadn't finished the Liberator set in The Way Back and Spacefall.
Yeah.
That was probably the only thing they had of the Liberator done, or done enough to put on camera.
Right.
So they're like, well, we have to give off the impression that this airlock goes straight into the bridge because that's all we can do.
Yeah. So they didn't have any of the corridors that they do now. They didn't even have the bridge back then either. The bridge was still in a questionable state in that episode even, as was the tube connecting two ships, which reminds me of the extremely similarly low-budget way that they filmed something in this story, but we're going to get there in just a second. But Villa basically falls and is hanging onto the edge of the Liberator, and then he lets go, and there's just a floor there.
He lets go. He's like, it looks bottomless. I can't tell how far the drop would be. And they're like, we'll drop something and see how far it falls. And he drops a flashlight, and it only falls about, 2-3 feet?
3 feet.
He's like, oh, and he just drops down, and there's a floor right there.
He's like, wow, cool guys, there's a floor. And he kind of wanders around for a bit, but then he gets attacked and they're like, wait, what's going on? Villa, what are you doing?
Some bright lights sort of freeze him, or he freezes in his path. He does this later on in the episode too, which gives me the impression that this isn't like psychic control or anything. This is just him being scared. Yeah, I think he's just scared. There is some psychic stuff going on with Callie, and we get a little more of Callie's backstory and a little more of the backstory of Oron as well.
Well,
later because Callie during all of this is like knocked out.
Yeah, right when they come through the black hole, Callie is knocked out, and she's mumbling about this person named
Thawne.
Thawne.
How do you spell that?
Thaarn.
Oh, so Tharn. Okay. Wow.
And she eventually wakes up, and Tarrant is like, "Oh, are you okay now?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You were like talking about this person named Thawne." She also indicates that like this is explicitly a retcon. You can't even argue this at all. But she says that she was actually exiled from her planet. It's not a retcon necessarily, but
it just means she was lying earlier.
She indicates that she was exiled from a planet, but when she was introduced, she said that she was on a self-imposed exile for failing in her mission, if you'll remember.
Right.
But in this one, the reason why it's a bit of a retcon is because she indicates that basically she did something on Oron that led to her getting exiled.
And this is what I was hinting at since Callie was introduced, basically, is that she is possibly a criminal as well. Because we'd always been like, well, Callie's the only one who's non-criminal.
I assume we're going to find out what that is this season, because there's an episode called Children of Oron.
And I don't know any more than what's in this. So I'll have to find out.
I mean, I definitely don't.
Yeah, I know I don't.
I'm just assuming we're going to find out in the episode called Children of Oron, because if there was ever going to be an episode that was going to be about Callie and Oron, it would be the one that has Oron in the name.
Hopefully it's not Callie's sort of redemption moment. And what I mean by redemption is the episode redemption. But I don't think this is a retcon. I think it's just Callie, lying or bending the truth a little bit in her introduction.
But even still, that would be a retcon, because we've never been shown Callie to be distrustworthy in what she says. She has never lied.
Well, we have now.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I'm saying it's a retcon, because now she's untrustworthy, but we've never had that before.
Well, a retcon is like something that goes back and actually changes events that took place in the past. This doesn't actually change it, because this is really cool. I really like what Series 3 or Series C is doing with this, because Series C is all about like trust, belief, reported speech, and like power, and how those things are all interrelated. And this is something that's absolutely related to that, because we find out now that Callie might have been lying when she was introduced. And there's a lot more in this episode that's actually about that, which was really cool to me.
I guess it feels like a retcon to me, honestly.
Because it might feel like a retcon.
It feels like a retcon because so much of her character was based on the fact that she was in self-imposed exile.
Exactly. Like, so much of this character was based on this thing that's now like probably a lie. And that's like awesome. Callie has power because of that, man. Like, we've been talking about this. We're like, Callie's trustworthy. She's the only one who's non-criminal. And now we find out, like, oh man, she really had like power over, like, she had something that none of these other characters had because of that. Because of like this lie.
I mean, the reason why it feels like a retcon, though, is because the way they set up the show was that Callie was the one who didn't lie. And that was like a key tenet of the show, was like, Callie doesn't lie, Villa's not trustworthy, Avon's not trustworthy.
Yeah, they're not.
Blake's not trustworthy, Jenna's not trustworthy, but Callie didn't lie. Yeah, and that was like what we set up. For,
every episode almost.
That's why it feels like a retcon now, because now they're saying, oh, she lied. To me, that's changing events. Like you said, definition of retcon, changing events that already happened. It's changing what she said then to be not a definitive explanation of what she did, but now it's a lie.
But what she said in what was the episode? Time Squad. What she said in Time Squad was just just what she said. She
said it was a self-imposed exile.
Yeah,
though.
But that's like that's just something that someone says people can lie.
Yeah, but she's never lied before, is what I'm saying.
Well,
she was always
she has, because of what we find out here, or at least we don't know. But that's why I'm saying this is a lie.
But that's why I'm saying it's a retcon, because she's never lied before, and now it's changing events so that is a lie. That's why I'm saying it's a retcon.
But we don't know. Like, even in Time Squad, we don't know whether that's true or not. I think this is actually something we talked about in Time Squad. We're like, we don't like, we just find this person on this planet and she has this backstory and we're like, all right, we're supposed to trust you, and we let her on the Liberator, and then, you know, stuff happens in the web as well, and that calls into question Callie's integrity. But like, I mean, it's just her saying this thing. We really don't know like what this is, and eventually you come to trust her because of who she is and what she does on the Liberator and how she helps everyone and how she's become sort of their medic, and she's like the peacekeeper almost. And you fall like into not complacency, but you fall into like this mode of thinking where, you know, you're on Callie's side. And if she leverages something there, and that's based on something that was just said, man, like,
I mean, yeah, it was just said, but I think you're looking past the point I'm actually trying to make.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I just completely don't agree with it because, like, it's just reported speech.
I guess, but I feel like honestly, I feel like that's a cop-out. I feel like that's a cop-out response because I feel like you can just use that for anything then. Like, oh, it's just reported speech. Like, I feel like in this instance, this is a change in Callie's character, that they're changing something that was established.
Yeah, but like, this is also something that, again, like I said before, something cool that like Series C is doing is like, it's calling into question like the integrity of what you even believe in a TV show. Like, you strongly believed what Callie said because of like the rhetoric of what we're shown, what we hear when we're watching these episodes.
I guess, but I still feel like that's a cop-out because then what's to say they didn't do that in Series A and B?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is Series C different?
Because they're actually like thematizing this stuff.
Are they really?
Yeah,
though?
Are
they honestly doing it different than Series B though?
Yes, they are. They're actually really bringing this stuff up, questioning it, and really having it be something that's thematized over multiple episodes. This is the one sort of trend because the quality of these episodes is like fluctuated wildly. But this is the one trend. These 4 episodes of Series C are hitting on this point, episode after episode.
But I mean, they did that all through Series B, though, because they would always hit on this thing, like, everybody called Blake a legend, and everybody said Blake was a legend, and Blake was like, but I'm not a legend, like, look at us, look at what we've done, and they hit on this with Inga, because they were like, look, he didn't want to tell them anything about Inga. It's like, this is not a new thing in the show, and I think that...
Not to this extent. I would not say to this extent, because there's actual lines of dialogue and things like this in these stories that are really, like, driving this home.
I guess, but we've always had Avon there going, can we really trust what Blake says? Like, that's always been a thing that's been on the show.
That's true. That's very true. So can we really trust what Callie said in Time Squad? You know, who knows? And can we really trust what she says now? I mean, who knows? Who knows what anyone's really saying and whether it's true or not, and like what the truth even is really in this sort of world, in Blake 7. And in our world as well.
Just feels like a cop-out to me, honestly.
All right. Well, if you want to see it that way.
I mean, because it feels like you're just saying, well, we can't trust anything.
Yeah. I think that's very true.
And I think if you can't trust anything, then what's the point of even doing this podcast? What's the point of talking about anything that happens in the episode? Because we don't trust anything that happens in the episode. There has to be, in my opinion, some level of trust between us and the people who create the show.
Well, I'm not talking about people who create the show. That's...
But I mean, the people who create the show...
Like, bringing that in is like... totally.
But the people who create the show are the ones who are putting this thought into the show, right?
Yeah, but you're hitting on things like intentionality and like authorial intent. The question of authorship which I don't want to even bring in.
But okay, so who decided to thematize this?
What do you mean?
This whole concept of not trusting what people say. Who decided to thematize it then?
Well, obviously it's the creators of the show, but that also doesn't matter. It's in the show whether they want. It doesn't. I take that back. It doesn't. We don't know who decided to, or if this was even decided as something that would be put into the show. It's in the show.
Okay.
Whether it's been decided or whether it was intentional or not.
But I'm not talking about intentionality.
No, you are. You're hitting on it at least.
I'm not. I'm trying to say there has to be some trust between us and the show. Okay,
well, but the way you like are explaining that is like there has to be some trust, not between, or like at least what you said before, not between.
Well, I said us and the people who make the show.
Yeah, so if you're and I think you should focus on the show itself.
But even still, there has to be some trust between us and the show. If you can't trust anything, I don't feel like there's a point.
Well, that's your feeling, and I disagree because I think there's so much cool and interesting stuff you can do when you like call these things into question, when you call belief into question, when you call into question the integrity, and that word is used almost paradoxically here, the integrity of truth and fact, and how those things are manipulated and how those things change. There's a line in this episode, it's later, and I wanted to bring it up later, but I'll bring it up now because we're touching on it, is there's actually a lot, and I'll go more into these as we get to them, but I'll just bring all these up now. Avon basically says later when Callie tells the story, she's like, instead of worrying about stories, let's worry about like here and now, what's right in front of us, what's real versus what's in stories, which is fake. There's a line later also from Avon, propaganda that we found useful when people were like, the Liberator is an indestructible ship, and he's like, that was just propaganda that we found useful. Later, there's this scene with Callie and what's his name, Tharn, later on, or that was his name, right, Tharn, later on, where she's laying down in that like fur bed or whatever. That scene like really brings into question like trust as like a method to power. She's like, I can't trust you, and I can't shoot you unless I can see you. And that's a little bit later in that scene actually. And how Tharn uses like trust to leverage power.
I don't know. It frankly just seems like a really cynical way to see everything. Because it feels like, how can you have character development if you can't trust what people say? How can you have any sort of development if you don't trust anything at all? Well, because it sounds like, to me, what you're saying is you can't trust any spoken speech at all, which to an extent, yes, that's true. But...
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But like, sorry, you had more to say. Go on.
Well, I was going to say, how do you have any sort of character development if you don't have some sort of trust in what is reported?
Well, first of all, I want to hit on this thing of character development, and this is getting into a really long side discussion, but whatever. I want to hit on this thing of character development is one. I just want to say, do we need character development in anything? What is character development, and why do we look for it?
Character development is what I watch for, honestly.
Okay, all right, but again, these are questions I don't have answers to. I just want to put it out there for both you and like anyone listening, and really anyone, is what is character development? Why do we look for it? Why do we need it? Do we look for it? Do we need it? And also, like, this is to me, this is character development for Callie, right? Because we find out now that like it calls into question, oh, she might have been lying this whole time. She might not be the person we thought she was.
But that feels like, it feels like a retcon to me.
Okay, well, it just feels like one. It's not. I'll say that. But
I disagree with that. It is to me.
But there's also this thing, like, this show now is doing so many cool things with this idea of questioning truth, the nature of truth. These are essentially philosophical questions, right? These are epistemological questions, and really ontological questions as well. And like, what is truth? What's the nature of it? How do we access it? Can we access it? Does it exist? And things like that. And this show is like actually, and this is crazy, right? This show that's really sort of a cult classic now is like really touching on these things in an awesome way. This reminds me, actually, I don't want to bring up Metal Gear Solid. I kind of hate that series now.
Let's not go there.
Anyway, we can move on from this, but there is more to talk about in this episode with these things specifically, especially in that scene later where Tharn really like he like empowers himself by keeping himself hidden.
Yeah, well, Tharn was banished according to Callie. Nobody disputes that, so I'm just going to say that's definitive truth.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we can call it that definitive truth. It's a story also. This is really interesting, the way it's connecting all these things to stories.
I guess.
Anyway, there's this robot thing that shows up. Villa is, he gets sort of a leak in his helmet.
It gets a leak in his helmet, and then Tarrant goes out to retrieve him, and I thought we're going to have an alien situation here where Villa's like infected with an alien, because he stands up right when Tarrant gets to him, and then Tarrant like looks him in the eye like really weirdly, but nothing ever comes of that. And then they all go out because they get attacked.
Villa takes off his helmet and he's like, hey, we can breathe out here, which is really strange. And there's an attacking sort of force, and I think we see this now, but it's this like, it reminded me on Doctor Who, Paradise Towers.
Yes.
That white robot thing that looked like, now that I didn't make this connection when we watched that Doctor Who episode, but now that I remember it, it's almost like a wind-up mouse toy designed to look like a stormtrooper. But it doesn't. But
quite an explanation. That.
But
in this episode, it looks
like an anglerfish.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has like teeth painted on. Avon says, and this is something also that we can question. Avon is like, it was designed by whoever designed it to scare underdeveloped
life
people.
Forms, yeah. I mean, that's just speculation. Pretty sure he says that's what he's speculating. Pretty sure he doesn't say that like definitive fact.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Avon. Maybe he's convinced himself. Who knows? Anyway, Crantor shows up from what was it called? Not Space City.
Freedom City.
Freedom City. No, it's not Crantor. It's Candor, I think. Crandor?
Something like that.
It was something very similar. I think it was Candor.
Well, check the credits.
He's not on the credits. Oh no, he's the Caliph. But he doesn't have a page.
Yeah.
On the Blake 7 wiki.
Yep, so he's not important.
No, that's not true. The Blake 7 wiki is pretty barren.
Barren is an understatement. They basically all get thrown in these cells, except for Callie, who
Callie's
gets taken to Tharn.
For a while, she goes get put in the cell. I think, if I remember correctly, she's taken somewhere else, then she's brought in the cell, then she's taken somewhere else again. Because she explains backstory thing with Oron.
They get thrown in the cell, and Dana didn't go with them, and she was on the ship, but then the people board the ship, and they take Dana because they think she's Callie, and she's like, no, I'm Dana.
Okay, let's just talk about Dana for a minute, and let's also talk about their lie detector gun things, but let's focus on Dana. Dana is quickly becoming Gan. She's quickly becoming the new Gan, and this really sucks, because even Gan wasn't this shafted like 4 episodes into Gan.
Dana did quite a bit more in Volcano than we actually gave her credit for on my rewatch, I noticed.
Okay, yeah. Well, we did need to rewatch Volcano, and you did, and I didn't. So.
We did not give her enough credit in Volcano.
Right.
Tarrant is really a stick in the mud, especially when the Federation troopers attack, and he's like, can you, like, kill him or something? And Dana's like, all you had to do was ask, and then she checks the grenade, and then that's when the future space commander goes tumbling off. By the way, we didn't mention how hilarious the backflip he does when he goes flying off after the grenade is.
I don't even remember the backflip. Another reason why we should have revisited this episode, or at least I should have rewatched it too. I don't know if we want to actually cover Volcano again in an episode. Probably not.
Probably not. But anyway, we didn't give Dana enough credit, but in this episode, she's definitely the Gan of this episode.
And this is not a good trend. Like, really?
No.
Doing this to Dana, even though she was set up as a potentially interesting character.
And doing it to Del Tarrant, too, if we're going to be honest.
Not so much in this one. I think he had a lot more, at least, to say in this.
He didn't do much in this episode, though. Callie and Villa were the real driving forces in this episode, and sure. Avon when he kind of cracks the code.
It just feels like the original cast was really strong, and
it feels like they've been replaced with cosplayers. Cosplay imposter.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But hey, that's okay. It can still go up from here. It can still get better.
Hopefully. But anyway, Dana's held at gunpoint, and they have...
they sell Orak as this tiny, bald dwarf.
Well, okay, they have these staves, I guess, that they can detect. I don't remember. They're like, if you lie, it'll kill you or something like that. We don't actually see these in action, I think.
No.
So maybe that itself is a lie. They're like, if you lie, this thing is going to go off and blow your head off.
Well,
do we see?
We do see the guy shoot someone with it. Not necessarily in that context, but we do see him shoot someone with it.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing also on this like question of truth, right? We see this thing.
Honestly, I don't remember him saying it was a lie detector. Like, I didn't even remember that till you brought it up. I just thought it was just a gun that he used.
They say, like, don't even try and lie because this thing will detect if you lie, and will either shoot you if that's the case, or it'll automatically go off or something like that. But, like, this also brings up this question of, like, why do we see it? Why do we believe it when we see it and not when we hear it?
My interpretation of that scene was that he said he was going to shoot her if she lied, and then he believed her when she said that she didn't know who Orak was and that she's not Callie. That was my interpretation of the scene.
I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure it was the devices have some sort of lie detector, because there's this scene later, actually this is right now, when they're walking out of the room, where Dana says that, I forget the line, it's like nobody knows exactly what Orak has up his sleeves, or like Orak doesn't have arms or something like that.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines, some like little loophole, because I think Orak is humanoid or something like that.
Well, Terrence like, oh, he's like yay tall, which is how tall Orak's wheelie cart is.
Yep. And there's this part of that scene
and
where
they said he doesn't
guy,
have hair, I think it was what it was.
That was what it was. And there's this part of this scene where she says that, and the guy looks at the gun like, what the hell? Like, this thing should have gone off because she probably lied. And then it doesn't go off, and he doesn't really shrug, but he like shrugs with his eyes. He like visually shrugs, and he's like, whatever. And you just go on.
Well, so then they take Callie to Thorn, and they just take Avon and Tarrant to this calculation room, I guess, and then Villa and Dana just chill in the cell for the rest of the thing.
Callie gives a little more backstory for Oron, because she's been contacted by this guy named Tharn via telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, who's Tharn? So she explains the story, this sort of myth about this
Oronian creation myth,
which is that there were 7 gods who came to Oron one day, dropped off. It's sort of Adam and Eve-esque, right? They drop off these 2 people, and they leave, and millions of years later they come back, and 6 of the gods were pleased with what they saw, and Tharn was not pleased. He's one of the gods. So he left, and he swore, or the other gods like locked him away or something.
Well, actually, you're missing the biggest part of the story, is that Tharn killed one of the other gods. And that's why they locked him away.
Yeah, okay,
because he killed one of the other gods.
He kills one of the other gods. He is locked away, but he like swears vengeance on everyone. He's like, one day I'll rule the universe or something like that.
And that was the other thing, is that they got their telepathy from the Orons got their telepathy from the gods. They like gave them as a gift. And Tharn was like against this, and that's why he kills one of the other gods. And then they're like, well, we're going to lock you away then.
Right. So very Judeo-Christian sort of story here.
Very Satan Pit Impossible Planet.
From Doctor Who?
Yes.
Well, that's also, I mean, just in the name, very Judeo-Christian and stuff.
And they're using these legitimate pencils in the calculation room, which I really want to bring up because Terrence, like, this freaking Terry Nationism, even freaking stories not written by Terry Nation. He's like, what is the graphite writing stick?
Hey, I actually had a note about that. I just wrote graphite writing stick.
Yeah, me too.
But I want to go back to this thing I said 2 seconds ago, the Judeo-Christian relation here. I actually want to semi-take that back because it is very Judeo-Christian, but I also don't want to like impose that on it. I think people, because a lot of Americans, including myself, are more familiar with like these Judeo-Christian traditions and stories, will impose that on whatever they see. And that's sometimes useful and sometimes not. So, you know, who knows?
Who knows?
Anyway, yeah, they're using the pencils because Tharn is afraid of computers.
Because apparently computers are smarter than Tharn.
This guy who's been talking to them since they came in the room, who looks like an old-time like ticket seller at a carnival or something, doesn't he? I mean, he has
he's
that
got the little visor.
Yeah. He's sort of telling them all this.
Well, there's this weird whole carnival vibe, actually. Sorry for interrupting, but there's this whole carnival vibe because we forgot to mention that the guy with the, quote, lie detector gun, unquote, is dressed like, he's got like a top hat and he's dressed like the ringleader of a circus.
Yeah.
So there's this weird carnival vibe going on with Tharn's little domain here.
I would actually really love to learn more about why they did that.
The anglerfish really, when they're running through their room, it really reminded me of like a fun room at like a haunted house or something. They're running through this fun room.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I wonder if there's any like behind the scenes story, like, well, the BBC just finished making this TV episode about carnivals, and then they just brought over the props and costumes.
Possibly. It's possible they just went into the like costume department and pulled them out, but like the fact that the anglerfish reminded me like straight out of like a fun house makes me think that maybe there was a little something more to it. Yeah,
that's interesting. I don't want to go too far with this idea because we've already touched on this a little. And even this, I don't know if I have any like real proof and stuff to draw from the story for this, but like that's something like when you go into these spaces, when you go into movie theaters in general, carnivals, these spaces of like, and this is a Byronian term, I don't know if I want to use this, but like suspension of disbelief. You go into these spaces and your perception of what's true and what's not is changed somehow. It's altered. You're in a different state. You're not in reality anymore. It's somehow different, but whatever. I'm not going to get too much into that.
But anyway, yeah. So
this is when
Thorne's afraid of computers.
Yeah, this is when they tell them. This is when he finds out that they're part of Blake's crew, or what used to be Blake's crew, and he's like, "Whoa, you guys were from the Liberator."
Yeah, because 2 guards go on the ship and they get killed by Orak,
Right.
who like generates like an energy beam and kills them, and they come back and like 2 men went onto your ship, the Liberator, and they got killed. They're also another freaking Terry Nationism, non-Terry Nation script. Apparently, the strongest material in the galaxy is called Herculanium.
Freaking unobtainium.
Freaking Herculanium. The hull of the Liberator is apparently made of Herculanium, which is why it's apparently indestructible or nearly indestructible.
But like, this is kind of dumb. But like, a lot of real elements are also named in like a dumb way, like that. Like,
well, so that's the thing. A lot of elements are typically named after where or who discovered them now, like Californium, Americium, Berkelanium, Uranium, Plutonium were named after planets. But like Herculanium...
Yeah, it's strong, so like Hercules.
Herculanium. Seriously?
There's also that god connection because Hercules was a demigod.
I guess. He was,
Maybe was that just in Disney?
No, he was a demigod.
Anyway, this is when Avon goes, when they find out they're from the Liberator, this is when Avon goes like, yeah, that propaganda was useful, when he's like, the Liberator is an indestructible ship that can do anything.
I mean, okay, but pause. The Liberator basically is indestructible.
Yeah, that's true. Avon kind of plays
The only time we've seen the Liberator not be indestructible is when that exact copy of the Liberator gets blown up.
And that's by the system as well.
Yeah.
So maybe Avon's statement here is the real propaganda when you think about it. Maybe because there's that saying, right? If you're weak, pretend to be strong, and if you're strong, pretend to be weak.
Maybe, but I don't want to go too much into it.
No,
because I already know what happens to the Liberator. So.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do too. I've been trying to keep that a secret, but if you already know.
Anyway, so Avon basically comes up with this plan where, like, if we turn off the energy dampers, then like we can escape.
There's like 10 or 15 minutes left in the episode at this point. There's like not much time to pull off this plan.
Yeah, and it works completely.
It works. There's some confusion. I think there's some blasts of steam or whatever in this room because we're only really shown one room of this supposedly or probably massive compound.
Yeah, Callie basically is like, yeah, I'll join you, but I don't know if I'm making this decision of my own choice, so can you like turn off the energy dampers so that I know I'm making this decision of my own choice? Because the energy dampers make it so that the guns don't work. Anyway, we immediately get a segment. It's called, does Avon hold it like a 6-shooter this episode? The answer is yes.
Really? I didn't notice it.
Yeah, he does. He like spins around real quick like a Western sharpshooter too.
I completely missed that, I guess.
It's like all I look for in the episodes now is, does Avon play this off like a space Western?
In some ways, it might be, but
does Paul Dara play it like a space Western?
Yeah.
I mean,
there's who knows? Maybe Avon, the character himself, is a big Western fan. There's, which would be a strange point.
That would be a strange character point.
But
to introduce,
there's some confusion. There's running around, and eventually Blake and not Blake. God dang it,
Tarrant.
Avon and Tarrant make it out, and they're like. I was like, you could take these guys with you because these guys all are here. They're all here for the same reason. They fell into the black hole too. And Tharn has them captive just as much as he has the Liberator crew captive. Could take them with them.
Yeah, this really baffled me actually because the guy's just like, tell my family I love them, and Avon's like, will do, bye. And I'm like, what?
You can just go. What? We didn't mention that Tharn wants the Liberator's parts. That's why it's there.
Yeah, he wants the Herculanium. We forgot to mention that they found another piece of another ship, and Zen analyzed it and like, it's basically from like a B-class freighter or whatever he says, freighter.
Oh man, they rank the freighters too. It's a B-class freighter.
But all the Herculanium has been drained out of it by some process that I don't know. And the other thing is a piece of it. Oh, God. He's like, this other piece is like a meteor, but also all the Herculanium's been drained. And then that's why also they start panicking on the Liberator start, because they know that the hull is made of Herculanium, and so that's why they're there.
Right. So they basically all make it back to the Liberator except Callie. She has a little more to deal with. Callie is in this room. This actually looks really cool. I don't know why I thought this looked so cool, because it's literally just a dark room with a pedestal in it. But she's sitting on this pedestal. It looks like it has almost like a animal skin type thing on it. Sitting on this pedestal, and what you said before is the exchange. She is like, I need to see you to trust you, and which is interesting because so far, all of Tharn's power, especially once you see him and once you see what he looks like, how he's this sort of, I mean,
he looks like Kiadi Mundi.
But not nearly as tall. He's a very he's like he's really short, and he doesn't look powerful really, truly in the slightest. And this is interesting because his power so far was derived from his ability to stay hidden, him keeping himself hidden, his people's inability to witness him. Basically,
I mean, I don't want to go too far with this, but we don't actually know that this is Tharn's true form. It's entirely possible he's just projecting something for Callie to look at.
And that's true. We also don't know whether or not this is Tharn, the one from the story. But this is also interesting because this form is like, Callie then like throws a wrench in this plan. She's like, well, in order to trust you, I need to see you. Mm-hmm. And it really brings up like, where do we get trust from? Like, this is something we were talking about before. Can we trust what we hear, or do we have to see it to believe it? Mm-hmm. Or do we have to see it to trust it? Well, what's the difference between trust and belief? How do I really don't know. But like,
that's not something I want to get into because I don't.
No, it's like that's like a philosophical and also linguistic in some way question. But like, why do we see it why do we believe it when we see it and not when we hear it? And I don't know.
Probably
whether that's even a valid question, but
probably because sight is a sense we use more often.
Yep, and sight is very, very valued in Indo-European languages, and especially Western European languages, like the Germanic languages, like English. Sight is very, very valued in those languages. Sight's valued in actually every human language.
I think everybody values sight because sight. That's the thing. Sight is almost required for human survival.
Yep.
Which is why it was always like, if you see it, then you got to believe it, because if you see a mammoth charging towards you and you don't believe that mammoth's charging towards you, then you're going to see the mammoth before you hear it, because that's a whole physics thing, light, sound, traveling.
Right, and this also brings up like this linguistic concept that people have been touching on for hundreds and hundreds of years and no one, I think, has really said it better and more summarily than Addie Bundren from As I Lay Dying, one of my favorite books, and that's why I keep bringing it up. But the words only get in the way. These things are all only concepts. You bring up this example, and I think it's a good example in terms of if you want to survive and if you want to stay alive in a prehistoric time where there are mammoths. Like if you see the mammoth charging at you, you can get out of the way. You're going to get out of the freaking way, or else you're going to die. But like, the mammoth itself is just, it's a word, and definitions of words aren't like imposed, they're like inscribed. Meaning is made like when you use a word, not like it's not like already in the word itself. So like the mammoth even itself is just a concept. And this is one line of thinking. I mean, I don't walk around saying like the door is just a concept and I walk right into the door. but like, even just saying that is paradoxical, because you can't describe like the concept of the door. And this is also touches on like almost Jungian, like collective unconscious type stuff. And I don't want to get too much into this, but like, I don't know, man. It's confusing and it's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the whole point is that we don't know if this is Tharn's true form. And if it's not, it's entirely possible he projects himself as a smaller person because that makes him seem more powerful.
Or weaker, it brings up this thing, and it
makes the power disparity between the appeared power and his actual power appear to be greater.
Right, and this is the thing brought up with the Liberator and Avon, and I said that as a joke, that he's saying like that thing about propaganda as his own form of propaganda, but this is actually really, really related. Again, if you're weak, that is a saying for a reason. If you're weak, try to pretend you're strong, and if you're strong, pretend you're weak. Mm-hmm. But I really like this scene because of how it actually calls into question like these things that we so take for granted and that we so believe. It's really cool, but Callie, we're left with this sort of cliffhangerish thing where we don't know if Callie shot him. Later on, we find out, quote unquote, that she didn't.
We forgot to talk about Tharn's plan, which is he basically wants to build this gravity machine that can control gravity, which will allow him to invert the space he's in so that he can go back to regular space and escape his prison, basically.
And he also says whoever controls gravity controls the universe.
Which is true. Just from a physical standpoint.
I mean, he's basically building a giant weapon, and he's like, whoever has the biggest weapon controls everything, which is...
Also true. So the Liberator is able to escape. They run through the room again with the anglerfish bot.
Yeah. Avon.
This scene was just hilarious to me because I knew exactly how they filmed this. They found a dark room at the BBC studio. They didn't put anything in it. They just put the actors in it and wheeled this anglerfish through it, and I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was effective, but I thought it was hilarious at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
All right.
I just find it hilarious to have this thought that they like put all the actors into like a just pitch black room and they're like, okay, this is what we're doing today, guys. The set is literally this pitch black room. There's like no walls. There's like no props. It's just this pitch black room.
There's some rocks, I think, on the floor. I'm
imagining Paul Dara turning to like, who wrote this again? What was his name? Turning to like James Follet or Desmond McCarthy and being like, you guys serious right now? Anyway,
Villa freezes in his tracks again, and there's a nice moment where Callie comes and is like, hey, what are you doing, man? Come on, let's go.
Hey, what are you doing, man? And then they escape. They don't really end on a silly line. They end on that somber note that like Thorne has escaped. Not that he's probably ever going to come back in the show again, but
no, he's probably not. And we also end on the line of Tarrant going, I made a promise to what's his face. We go tell his family that he died.
We could tell his family that we could have gotten him out of there, but instead we let him die. Thorne didn't even die, and this guy died for nothing.
Yeah, we also find out Callie didn't kill Thorne, supposedly. And I think there's more evidence that she didn't kill him, but I don't remember what it is.
They like see something leave the negative space, the black hole. That's how they know.
Yeah. So Thorne's out there somewhere. I don't think Thorne's coming back.
No.
But yeah, this is really weird. Last week we got the line that Tarrant doesn't trust anyone.
Yeah.
Here, this doesn't contradict not trusting anyone, but it's also weird that he's like, I made this promise and I'm going to keep it.
He's trying to make himself out to be a trustworthy person, I think.
Maybe.
That was another thing that actually in Volcano, because Callie says something like, "Oh, Tarrant went through the." I'm surprised, honestly, you didn't pick up on this because this is everything you've been talking about. Because Villa says Tarrant went through the space. Well, actually, I think Callie says Tarrant went through the Space Academy, and Villa says, "So he says." Which is also
that's in this episode too. Tarrant is like, I trained, I forget, there's an acronym, SSR, space.
I mean, even him saying he trained at the Space Academy is directly contradicting the story he gave Avon in Power Play.
Not Aftermath, Power Play.
Because he said, I was just an independent captain and I stole this uniform.
Oh, yeah.
And what's weird to me about this whole thing is that Avon never calls Tarrant out on this.
Yeah, he doesn't. That's also an interesting thing. There's this thing also earlier in the episode, and I was considering having this be my what would Blake do, is when they are getting sucked into the black hole and they don't know what it is at first, Avon's like, well, I suggest we do nothing. Or he doesn't actually say that. Someone's like, well, Villa says, what do you suggest we do, Avon? And he's like, nothing.
Yeah.
Which was interesting.
I don't know. Series C is really weird in my opinion.
I really like... I obviously didn't like Volcano very much, but I really like what this series is sort of doing. And I love Aftermath, favorite episode, and I love this one too.
I thought this episode was good and entertaining, and I think it worked really well. Definitely, probably not in my top 3, maybe top 5 or 10.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Just because I feel like when it started off really similar to Shadow.
It even I think even after the halfway mark, I think it was pretty similar to Shadow with Callie off doing her own thing. Yeah. She's contacted by like a psychic force, and I do think Shadow is better than this one. Yeah,
absolutely, in my opinion. I definitely really like Shadow, and that's why I think this episode can't really fall in my top 3 because Shadow's my favorite episode of the show so far. So to have this episode be
have a lesser Shadow.
Yeah, it's kind of in the shadow.
Wow.
Of Shadow. And all that bombshell. Unless you have anything else you want to say.
Nope.
Okay, so we should, before we go any further, answer the questions that we posed at the start of this episode.
Definitely not splicing this in because we forgot.
We're professional podcast hosts. So since I didn't ask the question first, I think you should give the answer first.
So the answer to my question, let's just actually reiterate the question in case you forgot. My question was, Callie compares Tharn to 2 mythological creatures from Earth. What were they? And the answer was B, unicorns and dragons.
And my question, let me just remind you, was at the beginning of the episode when they're playing Space Monopoly, Villa's complaining about losing and Dana offers to give him rent in Space City. What is the rent that she charges in Space City? And the answer was, I believe, C, $5,000 a night. So now you know, pat yourselves on the back once again if you got them right.
If you got these obscure facts right.
If you got these rather obscure and meaningless facts right, pat yourself on the back, give yourself a gold star on your little I hope you're keeping track of how many you get right, because once again, there's going to be a test at the end of the podcast. So make sure you put your gold star. We can go into our email responses for this week. As usual.
We might want to just sort of explain, because we've had this running discussion about science fiction and the nature of science fiction for a couple weeks, and we've been questioning, like, do we really want this to be on Zenith? Not because we don't value people's opinions, but because it's a long discussion that's not directly related to Blake 7. So I think what we're probably going to do is, if you have stuff about that, definitely email us, but we're going to be picking those, when we cover emails, we're going to be taking that stuff out of the email, and we're going to be putting it after our outro sequence. So if people just want to focus on Blake 7, if they don't want to listen to any of that, they can just do that. They can just stop when we play the outro music, and that's it. And if you want to continue listening, the rest of it will be after that.
Yeah. Not that I think we have anything this week, because Sergeant Trainer didn't talk about science fiction in his email this week. Okay, Dawn of the Gods. Subject line is Dawn of the Gods. Hey guys, so Dawn of the Gods. Aurak is little Mr. Bossy Pants this episode. I like it. Good building suspense at the start with the ship behaving unusually for mysterious reasons. Did you dig Space Monopoly? I sure did. See attached, which is just a picture of Space Monopoly. We'll put it on the show notes. Kind of weird. Terrence stopping Avon, putting on a suit, exclaiming, "We all go together." Villa goes outside, pops a suit, maybe gets killed. Did you guys think he might actually be dead? Nope.
Nah.
I could have totally seen them offing a character like this. Terrence getting kind of big for his britches, isn't he? He seems to think he's the leader now. What do you guys think? Amongst my friends, a Tarrant became a slang term used to describe a pale, weak, second-rate replacement for a much better character that got written out of the story, i.e. Blake in this case. Tarrant sure does feel like a bargain basement Blake, doesn't he? Can you guys think of any Tarrants from other shows or stories out there where better characters got replaced with weaker ones? Hey, cool, we finally get to see the Liberators' defense mechanism kill some borders. So the Thawne turn out to look pretty much how they described Aurak, a bald midget. Villa, I'm in hell, and it's full of Avons. I forgot about that line. I thought it was really fun. Pretty good this week, IMO, but certainly has some weak points, particularly towards the end. I'll give it 5.5 out of 7. Sergeant Drano, Station 7, the door. I was thinking of Terrence and other episodes. Yeah, you know, if you want to go there, NCIS, when they killed off Caitlin Todd in Season 2 and replaced her with Ziva David. Ziva David was just to discount Caitlin Todd, but then she eventually became her own character, so it was good, which I'm hoping is what they're going to do with Tarrant. The actual Tarrant.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure I could think of some probably, but put me on the spot like this, I can't, so.
Yeah, that's the other thing in the future. We're going to be trying to keep our responses to these emails pretty short but concise, I think, because we're starting to get a lot more email responses to our episodes, which is good, and we really appreciate that, but we don't want our email responses to be the bulk of our episodes, so definitely email us. We're just going to try to be more, a little, I guess, concise and precise in our responses to these emails so that it goes a little quicker. Right,
and I think what we're going to do is something I did a couple weeks ago, but not to that extent, because if you listen to, I forget what episode, but it was a few weeks ago, I had this long typed response.
No, your response was in Aftermath.
Right, in Aftermath, I had this very long typed response to an email. I think we are going to go down the route of typed responses so that we focus on what we want to say and get it said in like 1 or 2 minutes each.
Right.
They won't be as long as the one that I had.
And I think we're going to try to figure out some way to put them on the website. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I know I keep saying I'm going to, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. And when I do, you all know, because they'll be on the website. So that's the only email we got this week, or at least as of the recording this episode. We may get more between now and when the episode goes out. But yeah, I'm hoping that Tarrant develops into his own character in some way. That's really my main response to this email. We get to see the Liberators' defense mechanism kill some borders. Really makes you wonder why they haven't used that before, i.e. in, like, Aftermath. But anyway, that's kind of a retcon.
I'll be looking forward to seeing, like, where Tarrant goes and where Dana goes, too. But Dana, so far, is not promising the way they're actually achieving her character on the show.
Right. But like I said, in Volcano, I really don't think we gave her enough credit. After rewatching it, I think she did a lot more, but I really do feel like in this episode, she was definitely a Gan.
Yep.
I guess that's just going to be our slang term for a character who doesn't do much in an episode.
Yeah. That's already stuck.
That's stuck when Gan was still on the show.
Yeah, which is really sad. You bring up one more really interesting thing that Tharn looks like how they describe Aurak, which is actually really cool and not something that I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's like trippy, man. Like,
I don't really think that has anything particular to say about anything, though. I think that's just almost a coincidence.
Well, who knows, man? I don't know. I mean, it's not something I really thought about.
Yeah.
Interesting. He also reminds me of the guy in the vat in the web almost.
Oh, yeah.
That was another
old
story.
dude.
Yeah, that guy had a name, but I forgot what it was. That was another
all had
story
names.
that was almost doing the same thing. That's really interesting.
Well, I don't have anything to say on that.
No, I don't either.
I really don't think it is saying anything. But anyway, if you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorative.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Dawn of the Gods. I believe next week, let me double check
we
this.
have
Next week is
something-
Harvest of Kairos,
Yep.
which we are planning to do with Making Blake 7, if you've forgotten. Which means we are going to be the world premiere of Making Blake 7's voice and
Heck
first
yeah.
name.
I'm hyped.
So,
If he decides to go by his first name,
if he decides to go by his first name and not by Making Blake 7,
right.
we shall see.
I'm
shall
hyped.
see. I'm
Excited
hyped.
for
It's going to be exciting, I think. And otherwise, you can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time, like we mentioned, we're doing a Harvest of Kairos with Making Blake 7. But until then, the end.